For more than 2 decades, NCIS has survived by doing something remarkably difficult: changing, without completely losing the identity that made it successful. The franchise has introduced new teams, new cities, new characters, and new tones, while maintaining the familiar combination of crime-solving, military intrigue, humor, emotional relationships, and long-running mythology. Now, CBS appears to be pushing that philosophy even further, and its newest NCIS series could be the biggest beneficiary yet. The advantage comes from an ambitious formula change. Rather than treating every NCIS show as a variation of the same procedural template, the franchise increasingly seems willing to give individual series their own identities. That could be exactly what the newest entry needs to stand out in an increasingly crowded television landscape. A franchise that can no longer rely on familiarity alone. When NCIS first became a television phenomenon, the basic formula was enough. Viewers knew what they were getting: a strange or dramatic death, an investigation, forensic discoveries, interrogations, personal conflicts, and eventually a satisfying resolution. But audiences have changed. Modern viewers have countless procedural dramas available through broadcast networks and streaming services. A new series cannot simply announce itself as another member of a famous franchise and expect automatic loyalty. It needs a reason to exist. That is where CBS's evolving approach becomes important. Instead of forcing every new NCIS project into exactly the same mold, the network has increasingly experimented with different eras, characters, locations, and storytelling structures. That experimentation gives the newest series an opportunity to feel familiar enough for longtime fans while remaining fresh enough for newcomers. And that balance may become its greatest strength. The power of the NCIS's name the newest series does not have to start from zero. The NCIS brand already carries enormous recognition. Viewers understand the world, the organization, and the basic emotional language of the franchise. That means a new show can spend less time explaining its premise and more time developing its characters. This is an enormous advantage. A completely original procedural might require several episodes before audiences become emotionally invested. An NCIS spin-off can potentially establish that connection much faster because viewers already understand what the characters are fighting for. But the franchise name can also become a burden. If a new series feels like nothing more than a recycled version of its predecessors, viewers may lose interest quickly. The challenge, therefore, is not simply to use the NCIS formula, it is to reinvent it. That is precisely why the current formula shift is so significant, giving the newest series its own personality. One of the most promising possibilities is that the newest NCIS series can establish a distinct personality, rather than existing as a carbon copy of the flagship. That personality could come through in the pacing, structure, character relationships, humor, action, or even the kinds of cases the team investigates. Imagine an NCIS series where the mystery is not always the centerpiece. Perhaps the emotional consequences of an investigation carry over across multiple episodes. Perhaps characters have complicated histories that influence how they approach their jobs. Perhaps cases are allowed to develop across longer story arcs instead of being completely resolved within 1 hour. Those changes may sound small, but together they can transform a familiar franchise into something dramatically different. And that is exactly what a new series needs. Serialized storytelling could be the secret weapon. The biggest opportunity may be serialization. Traditional procedural television often gives viewers a complete story every week. That structure is comfortable and accessible, but modern audiences have become increasingly comfortable following complicated stories across entire seasons. The NCIS franchise already has the characters and mythology necessary to support that approach. A new series could introduce a major mystery early in the season, slowly reveal clues, and allow individual cases to connect to a much larger narrative. Characters could discover secrets about one another. Old decisions could return to affect current investigations. Personal relationships could evolve naturally rather than resetting at the end of every episode. That would create another reason for viewers to return every week. Instead of simply asking, "What case will the team solve next?" audiences could begin asking, "What is really happening behind the scenes?" That distinction could make the newest series particularly addictive. Familiar characters, different stories. Another advantage is the franchise's ability to connect its different generations. Crossovers have always been an effective way to remind viewers that the NCIS universe is larger than one team, but the new formula could make those connections feel more meaningful. A character from another NCIS series could appear without completely taking over the episode. A familiar name could be referenced in a way that rewards longtime viewers without confusing newcomers. That creates a shared universe rather than a collection of unrelated shows. For longtime fans, those connections provide nostalgia. For newer viewers, they create the feeling that they have discovered a much larger world. It is a win on both sides. The characters will matter more than ever. Ultimately, however, no formula can save an NCIS series if audiences do not care about its characters. The franchise's greatest successes have always been built around personalities. Gibbs was not simply an investigator. He was a complicated leader with a deeply guarded emotional life. Other beloved characters became important because viewers cared about their friendships, rivalries, romances, mistakes, and personal struggles. The newest series needs that same emotional foundation. Viewers should be able to imagine where these characters came from, understand what motivates them, and wonder where their lives will take them next. A good procedural makes viewers interested in the case. A great television series makes viewers interested in the people solving it. Why CBS may have made the right gamble there is always risk in changing a successful formula. Some longtime viewers may initially resist. Others may wonder why CBS is changing something that already works. But remaining completely unchanged can be even more dangerous. Television franchises eventually reach a point where repetition becomes more noticeable than familiarity. CBS therefore has an opportunity to refresh NCIS without destroying what made it popular. The goal should not be to abandon the franchise's identity. It should be to understand which elements are essential and which elements can evolve. The military connection can remain, the investigations can remain, the humor can remain, the emotional relationships can remain. But the storytelling structure can change. That distinction is crucial. A new generation of NCIS fans, perhaps the biggest long-term benefit, is the possibility of attracting viewers who have never watched the original series. A new NCIS show with its own identity could become an entry point into the entire franchise. Someone might discover the newest series first, become attached to its characters, and then eventually explore the older shows. In that sense, a formula change does not necessarily weaken the franchise's history. It can actually introduce that history to a new audience. That could be especially important as television continues to evolve. A franchise that depends exclusively on nostalgia eventually becomes limited by its own history. A franchise that uses nostalgia as a foundation while continuing to create new stories has a much better chance of surviving. The biggest question, the real test, will be whether CBS can maintain the balance. If the newest NCIS series becomes too different, it may lose the qualities that make the franchise recognizable. If it stays too similar, viewers may wonder why they need another series at all. The sweet spot is somewhere between those extremes. The newest show needs to feel like NCIS without feeling like yesterday's NCIS. That is a difficult target, but it may also be the franchise's most exciting opportunity. The future of the franchise, CBS's ambitious formula change, could ultimately prove to be more than a strategy for launching one new series. It could become a blueprint for keeping the entire NCIS universe relevant for another generation. The franchise has already demonstrated that its central concept is flexible enough to survive enormous changes. The next step is proving that its storytelling can evolve just as successfully. If CBS gives the newest series room to develop its own voice, invests heavily in memorable characters, embraces stronger season-long narratives, and uses the larger NCIS universe intelligently, the result could be something surprisingly powerful. It would not simply be another spin-off. It could be the series that demonstrates why the NCIS formula still works and why changing that formula may be exactly what the franchise needs. After all, the greatest strength of NCIS has never been that it stays the same. It is that it knows how to change while remaining recognizable. And if CBS gets this latest experiment right, the newest chapter of NCIS could become proof that a franchise more than 2 decades old can still find new ways to surprise its audience. CBS's ambitious NCIS formula change gives its newest series a major advantage. Part 2. The biggest opportunity created by CBS's evolving NCIS formula may not be immediately visible. It is not simply about changing the number of cases, introducing different characters, or experimenting with a new setting. The real opportunity is to change how viewers emotionally experience an NCIS story. For years, the franchise has relied on a dependable rhythm. A case begins, clues are discovered, suspects are questioned, personal complications emerge, and the mystery is eventually solved. That structure helped make NCIS one of television's most recognizable procedural brands. But the newest series has the opportunity to make viewers feel as though every episode is part of something larger. The case can become more than the case. One of the most effective ways to modernize an established procedural is to give individual cases lasting consequences. A suspect might disappear at the end of an episode and return months later. A decision made during an investigation could damage a character's career. A seemingly minor clue could become important much later. Even a successful mission could create emotional consequences that follow the team into another story. That kind of continuity makes the world feel more realistic. It also gives audiences a reason to pay closer attention. Instead of watching an episode and forgetting most of it by the following week, viewers begin looking for details. A conversation that seems insignificant could suddenly become crucial. A character's strange behavior might eventually be explained. That is the type of storytelling that can turn casual viewers into dedicated fans. The new series has something the original never had. There is another fascinating advantage. The newest NCIS series does not have to prove that the basic concept works. The original series already did that. The franchise has decades of experience showing which characters, relationships, themes, and story structures connect with audiences. A new series can learn from those successes without being trapped by them. That distinction is incredibly valuable. CBS can essentially use the history of NCIS as a giant storytelling laboratory. The writers know audiences appreciate strong team chemistry. They know personal stakes matter. They know humor can provide relief after intense cases. They know emotional departures can have enormous impact, but they also know that repeating the same story indefinitely can weaken its impact. The newest series can therefore take the lessons of the past and apply them differently. The team dynamic could be the defining feature. Every successful NCIS team eventually develops its own chemistry. That chemistry becomes almost as important as the investigations. The audience wants to see how team members disagree, support each other, compete, joke around, and react when one of them is in danger. This is where the new formula could become particularly powerful. Rather than immediately trying to recreate a legendary team dynamic, the newest series can allow relationships to develop slowly. At first, two characters may distrust each other. Another pair might become instant friends. A senior investigator could struggle to accept a younger agent's unconventional methods. Someone else might appear confident professionally while secretly dealing with enormous personal pressure. Those differences create friction, and friction creates stories. Leadership should be complicated. Another major advantage would come from giving the team's leader genuine weaknesses. One of the reasons iconic NCIS leaders became so memorable was that they were never simply perfect supervisors. Their pasts influenced their decisions. Their personal losses shaped their behavior. Their leadership styles sometimes created conflict. The newest series can continue that tradition without copying previous characters. A leader who is too perfect becomes predictable. A leader who makes questionable decisions can become fascinating. The audience might understand why a character makes a particular choice while simultaneously disagreeing with it. That creates emotional tension that a simple procedural mystery cannot provide. And when the team eventually has to decide whether to follow that leader, the stakes become much higher. The franchise can also embrace mystery. One of the most exciting possibilities is giving the new series a central mystery that cannot be solved in a single episode. Perhaps there is an unexplained event in the team's past. Perhaps a recurring adversary is manipulating investigations from the shadows. Perhaps someone within the broader system is hiding information. The important part is that the mystery should not overshadow the characters. Instead, it should reveal them. Every new piece of information could force a character to make a difficult decision. Every discovery could challenge the team's assumptions. That way, the larger mystery becomes a character development engine, rather than simply a plot device. Why viewers could become more invested. Modern television audiences often form strong emotional relationships with characters because they spend so much time with them. A serialized NCIS structure could take advantage of that. Imagine watching a character make a mistake in the opening episodes, and then seeing that mistake affect them throughout the season. Imagine another character slowly becoming more trusting after years of keeping everyone at a distance. Those changes matter because they are earned. And when a major event finally happens, the emotional impact is greater because viewers have experienced the journey alongside the characters. That is one area where the newest NCIS series could distinguish itself dramatically. Nostalgia should be used carefully. There is no question that recognizable faces and references can generate excitement, but nostalgia works best when it serves the story. A surprise appearance from an established NCIS character can be thrilling. A familiar location can produce an emotional reaction. A reference to an old case can reward longtime viewers. But if every major moment depends on the past, the new series risks becoming trapped by it. The goal should be to create new iconic moments rather than endlessly recreate old ones. That means letting the newest characters stand on their own. Eventually, viewers should talk about these characters with the same affection they have for the franchise's older favorites. That is the real measure of success. A franchise built for evolution. The fascinating thing about NCIS is that evolution has always been part of its identity. Characters have come and gone. Teams have changed. Relationships have transformed. The franchise has expanded into different locations and eras. Yet the central idea remains recognizable. That makes the current formula experiment less frightening than it might appear. CBS is not necessarily rebuilding NCIS from scratch. It is testing how far the franchise can evolve while maintaining its core identity, and that could benefit every series in the universe. If the newest show succeeds with a more flexible storytelling model, future NCIS projects could adopt similar ideas. The risk is also the opportunity. Of course, experimentation can fail. A new series could become too complicated. A serialized mystery could move too slowly. Characters could become overly dramatic. Viewers who prefer traditional procedural storytelling might feel alienated. Those risks are real, but avoiding risk creates its own problem. If CBS never experiments, the franchise could gradually become predictable. The newest series, therefore, has an unusual responsibility. It has to prove that NCIS can evolve without losing its soul. If it succeeds, the reward could be much bigger than one successful television show. It could extend the life of the entire franchise. The beginning of another era that may ultimately be why CBS's formula change is so important. The newest NCIS series is arriving at a moment when television itself is changing. Viewers expect deeper characters, longer story arcs, stronger continuity, and greater emotional consequences. At the same time, audiences still love the comfort of a familiar procedural. NCIS sits directly in the middle of those two worlds. The franchise can provide the familiarity people already love while experimenting with storytelling techniques that feel contemporary. That combination may be its secret weapon. The newest series does not need to reject everything that came before it. It simply needs to understand why those earlier stories worked and then find a new way to make audiences care. If CBS manages that balance, the newest NCIS chapter could become more than another addition to an enormous television franchise. It could become evidence that even after decades on television, NCIS still has room to reinvent itself. And sometimes, the biggest advantage a long-running franchise can have is the courage to stop doing exactly what everyone expects. CBS's ambitious NCIS formula change gives its newest series a major advantage. Part 3. The most interesting question surrounding the newest NCIS series is no longer whether the franchise can survive another change. After more than 2 decades, that question has essentially been answered. The franchise has already survived cast departures, changing television trends, shifting audience habits, and the end of several beloved series. The more important question is whether NCIS can make change feel exciting again. That is where CBS's new approach could become especially valuable. The advantage of starting with a clean slate. One of the biggest benefits of a new series is freedom. Established shows carry enormous amounts of history. Every new storyline has to coexist with years of continuity. Characters have relationships that viewers already understand. Previous decisions can limit what writers are able to do next. A newer NCIS series does not have that same limitation. Its characters can make mistakes. Relationships can develop naturally. Mysteries can be introduced without decades of established expectations. Most importantly, the writers can build the show's identity from the ground up. That gives the series a chance to establish its own emotional language. The first season could define everything for a new NCIS series. The first season is more than an introduction. It is a promise. It tells viewers what kind of show they are watching. Is it primarily a traditional procedural? Is it a character-driven drama? Is it a darker thriller? Is it an action-heavy investigation series? Or can it successfully combine all of those elements? The answer will determine whether audiences remain invested. A strong first season should therefore introduce more than characters and cases. It should establish themes that can continue for years. Perhaps the series is about trust. Perhaps it is about rebuilding after failure. Perhaps it explores the difference between professional duty and personal loyalty. Those themes can give the show an identity that goes beyond its weekly mysteries. The emotional stakes could become bigger. The NCIS franchise has always understood that investigations become more interesting when they affect the people solving them. The newest series can take that idea even further. A case involving a missing service member might force one character to confront a personal memory. An investigation into corruption could challenge another character's faith in the institution they serve. A seemingly routine assignment could expose a secret that changes the team's relationships. These stories create emotional consequences. And emotional consequences are what make viewers return. People may tune in for the mystery, but they stay because they want to know what happens to the characters. A more modern balance between case and character, this may be the biggest formula change of all. Instead of dividing an episode into a case story and a separate personal story, the two could become one. The investigation itself could reveal something about a character. A character's personal problem could affect the investigation. The professional and personal worlds could collide naturally. That would make the storytelling feel less mechanical. Rather than stopping the investigation so a character can discuss their feelings, the emotional development could happen because of the investigation. That is a subtle change, but it can make a procedural feel much more sophisticated. The possibility of long-term villains. Another major opportunity is the introduction of recurring antagonists. Traditional procedural villains often appear for one episode and disappear forever. A modern NCIS series could create opponents who evolve alongside the team. A villain might initially appear to be a minor suspect, only to reveal a much larger agenda later. Another could become an ideological opponent rather than simply a criminal. The most interesting adversaries would challenge the team's beliefs rather than merely their investigative skills. If viewers begin wondering when an antagonist will return, that character becomes part of the show's mythology. That is how television creates memorable rivalries. The new series can also build its own mythology. Every successful, long-running drama eventually develops mythology. The original NCIS built an enormous mythology around its characters, agencies, relationships, and past events. The newest series can do the same. It might create recurring locations. It might introduce mysterious organizations. It might establish traditions within the team. It might develop secrets that are not revealed until much later. These details can make a fictional world feel larger than the episode currently being watched. That is especially important for streaming-era audiences who are accustomed to searching for theories, analyzing clues, and discussing hidden details online. Fan discussion could become part of the experience. Modern television is no longer limited to what happens during an episode. Fans discuss theories on social media. They analyze trailers. They debate character relationships. They search for clues. They revisit old episodes, looking for details they missed. A serialized NCIS series could benefit enormously from that culture. A carefully placed mystery could generate weeks of speculation. A surprising character decision could inspire competing theories. A shocking ending could create conversations that continue until the next episode. That kind of engagement can keep a show visible long after an episode ends. But CBS cannot forget the casual viewer there is an important balancing act. Not everyone wants to study every detail of a television show. Some viewers simply want to sit down after a long day and watch an entertaining investigation. That audience is extremely important to NCIS. Therefore, serialization should enhance the series, rather than make it impossible to understand. A viewer should be able to enjoy an individual episode while longtime fans receive additional rewards from the larger story. That is arguably the ideal formula. Casual viewers get a satisfying story. Dedicated fans get deeper mythology. Everybody wins. The franchise's greatest strength is still its people. No matter how ambitious the storytelling becomes, the characters will remain the foundation. A complicated conspiracy means very little if the audience does not care who survives it. An impressive action sequence means little if there is no emotional reason to worry about the people involved. A shocking revelation matters because of who discovers it. That is why casting and character development will be crucial. The newest series needs performers who can create believable chemistry. It needs characters who can disagree without becoming enemies. It needs friendships that feel earned. It needs relationships that can change over time. Most importantly, it needs characters who can surprise viewers. A new generation can create new icons. This may be the ultimate prize. The NCIS franchise already has characters who have become television icons, but the franchise cannot depend forever on the same names. A new generation needs its own heroes. The newest series has the opportunity to create characters who eventually become synonymous with the franchise. That process cannot be forced. It happens gradually. Audiences watch characters struggle. They watch them succeed. They watch them make mistakes. They watch them grow. Eventually, those characters stop feeling like fictional creations and start feeling like familiar companions. That is when a television series becomes truly powerful. Why the timing matters, CBS's decision to experiment with the NCIS formula comes at an interesting moment. Television viewers have more choices than ever. The traditional network procedural has to compete with streaming dramas, limited series, international productions, and countless other forms of entertainment. Simply being part of a famous franchise is no longer enough. The newest NCIS series, therefore, has to offer something audiences cannot get elsewhere. Its advantage is that it can combine two things that rarely coexist easily: familiarity and experimentation. Viewers recognize the world, but they do not necessarily know where the story is going. That uncertainty can become incredibly compelling. The future may depend on this experiment. If the new formula works, CBS could discover a powerful model for the future of the franchise. Instead of every NCIS series following one predictable structure, each new entry could have its own personality. One series could emphasize character drama. Another could focus on action. Another could explore history. Another could lean heavily into mystery. They could all still belong to the same universe while offering different experiences. That would make the franchise feel larger rather than repetitive. The real test is whether it feels fresh. Ultimately, audiences will decide whether CBS has made the right choice. The newest NCIS series can have an impressive cast, ambitious stories, major connections, and a recognizable brand. But none of that guarantees success. Viewers have to feel that something is different. They need to believe that this is not simply another team wearing the NCIS name. They need to see a reason to become emotionally invested. If CBS can accomplish that, the formula change could become one of the smartest decisions the franchise has made in years. Because the future of NCIS may not depend on protecting the formula that made it famous. It may depend on proving that the formula can evolve. And if the newest series becomes the experiment that finally gets that balance right, it could give the entire NCIS universe something it desperately needs: a new reason to believe that its best stories may still be ahead.